There are unhealthy therapists out there, and the Christian title is not a guarantee of health. Thank you so much for joining us with the Living Stones podcast. My name is Allison, and today I'm joined by Anna. Anna, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Anna. I'm a counselor. I graduated with my master's last summer, and I have a particular passion for working with kids.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here today. So let's talk about the 6 red flags when it comes to Christian counseling. So flag number 1 is spiritual bypassing. So this means forcing a spiritual meaning on trauma. What does that look like?
Spiritual bypass is often used to circumvent talking about trauma or really difficult things that people have experienced in their lives.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it often shows up in Christian counseling settings when either the therapist or the client or both are not fully comfortable delving into those deep topics and instead overlay a spiritual meaning or use only spiritual language to talk about trauma.
Could we give an example of that? Maybe do a little role play. I'm the
Sure.
client, and I say it to you. And you're going to be a spiritually bypassing counselor.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I'm being bullied really bad at school.
Yeah, that's hard, but God loves you and He's always with you. So you don't have to be afraid of the bullies.
Okay. That makes sense right there. Yeah, that's getting around what's being said and just slapping a spiritual band-aid right on it.
Yeah, and it really misses the opportunity for the therapist to join with the client in what they're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Another red flag is lack of connection. So the client does not feel supported enough to share deeply. It doesn't feel like a good fit. The client has to work hard to seem interesting enough to the counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really hard one. And it does happen. And, I think the most fundamental part of the therapeutic relationship is feeling connected, feeling heard and validated and seen by your therapist. So if you're with a therapist who doesn't seem to be connected to you or be very emotionally responsive, then it might be a sign that that's not the right fit.
I think of some experiences I've heard from people or clients where their therapist doesn't remember simple things about their lives. Names of people. It is tricky. Coming from a therapist's point of view, it is tricky to remember the names of all the people in your life, but when it comes to spouses or, family members that are brought up frequently, whenever the therapist can't remember or recall those names or themes. Yeah, how that can make you feel really disconnected from them. So the third red flag is promoting dependency. So excessive contact outside of sessions or lack of goals for independence coming from the counselor.
Yeah. The goal of therapy is really to support the client in working towards their goals and working towards greater independence as appropriate. Yeah. And so when a therapist or a counselor is trying to exert too much control or too much power or have, too much say in the client's life and they're not really honoring their autonomy, that can be a sign that maybe the therapist isn't in a healthy space for themselves.
Would you say it's normal for a therapist to text outside of session to the client?
No, that is not normal. Outside of, talking about appointments and scheduling, that is not a normal
No,
behavior.
Just say like, hey, how'd the conversation go?
Nope. Nope. We usually save that for the next session.
Yes, absolutely. The fourth red flag is judgmental or a shaming spirit. So the client feels worse about themselves or feels shame after counseling.
Yeah, no one wants to feel that, right? No one wants to go to a therapist and leave the session feeling worse. You want to make sure you're feeling supported and cared for, understood. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't some healthy, challenging. Your therapist might give you some things to think about differently.
Yes.
But that should never be in the spirit of shame or judgment. Yeah. It should always be with empathy, with kindness, with gentleness.
I think there's 2 extremes here. There's therapists that are too affirming, but then there's the other extreme of therapists that are shaming their clients, making them feel bad, but finding that middle ground where there's accountability and there's some challenging, but I think that has to come after some time of building rapport with your client and knowing them and them knowing you and trusting you enough that you can speak into those areas.
That's right.
Not coming off too hot right away either on either side of that spectrum.
Yeah. You need to feel safe as a client.
Absolutely.
And shame and judgment they never feel safe.
Yeah. So true. The fifth red flag is blurred ethical boundaries. So this would be inappropriate personal sharing, trying to have a relationship outside of sessions, and neglecting confidentiality. Yeah, do you want to speak into the one or all of those?
Yeah, those are big ones. And often those things start from the first session.
Yep.
Is your therapist should be doing what's called informed consent. So telling you what your rights are, the expectations for communication outside of sessions, boundaries, and confidentiality. That should all be established right at the beginning.
The fifth red flag is blurred ethical boundaries. So there's three ways that we typically see this happening. So the first one, inappropriate personal sharing.
Yeah.
What would you say that looks like in session? Because there's ways that you can share about yourself as a therapist, but when does it take a turn where it's kind of inappropriate?
Yeah, this is a hard one because there are different levels of what we would call self-disclosure. So when the therapist shares something about their personal life or experience in session with a client. But when that starts to become unethical is when the therapist is sharing something that is making the session about themselves rather than about the client. It should always be about the client. That's what we're here for. That's our job. And so when that sharing gets to a point where it's too much information or information that could trigger a client or cause the client to feel like now they have to be the caretaker for the therapist, those are some red flags.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so sharing things about yourself as a therapist, not exactly a bad thing.
No, not always.
But the intention should be for the client's good.
Yes. Always.
Yeah. The second one is trying to have a relationship outside of sessions. What does that typically look like between a therapist and a client?
Yeah, that can get really messy really quickly.
Yeah.
If a therapist allows or pursues a friendship, a romantic relationship, or just has excessive contact with a client outside of sessions, those can all be considered unethical to varying degrees and can really damage the safety and trust of the therapeutic relationship.
And I can understand why it's tempting to engage in that. You feel really connected to your therapist. I had a client say to me that for her birthday, she wanted to invite all the people in her life that have been a support to her over the past year to her party, and she wishes so badly I could be there. I understood what she was saying.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You feel so connected to your client, and the client feels connected to you as a therapist, but yeah, that can get really messy really quickly. And the third one is neglecting confidentiality. Yeah, that one's bad. That's really bad.
Yeah. Not only is it a legal obligation, an ethical obligation, but it's also, again, a big aspect of the client feeling safe, feeling like they can trust their therapist. So when that's broken, that trust is also broken. And sometimes, not honoring confidentiality can be a purposeful act by the therapist. Sometimes it can be just a neglectful or forgetful act. And either way, it really does harm the relationship.
Yeah, it's difficult when you live in small towns to honor that. If you recognize a name or, oh, this is this person's cousin, to not disclose it's your client.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how you know them.
Yes.
Doing that constant check. Why do I know this person? Or how do I know that name? Always being on guard to not neglect confidentiality with your clients. And the sixth red flag is unaccountable expertise. There's 3 examples of this one as well. So the first one being defensiveness when questioned.
This happens when the ego takes up a big place in the therapy room. So the therapist feels that they have to defend their knowledge, their expertise, defend their role. Therapists are humans too, and their egos do get in the way sometimes. But that's why we have to be really careful in this field that we're constantly keeping that in check and making sure that we're prioritizing the client and not prioritizing our own ego and our own expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. The second one is typecasting the client into a rigid category.
As therapists, we want to help people, but sometimes it feels easier to just feel like, well, this is who you are and this is your problem, instead of actually developing a relationship, understanding this person as a whole complex human. And so when that happens in therapy, clients, they don't feel heard. They don't feel understood. They feel kind of like just put into a box. And that's going to cut off any ability to open up to trust.
Another way that we see therapists not held accountable is if they're not in community or consultation or training with other therapists. Yeah, they're kind of just on their own island providing services to clients.
Yeah, and this is huge, and that can be really dangerous. We operate best in community and relationship with each other, and especially with the work that we're doing, it can be really hard. There's so many emotions involved and often personal reactions. And when we're able to, as therapists, rely on our colleagues and our peers, we can keep those things in check. So if you're noticing that maybe your therapist or someone in the field is operating on their own without this support and accountability, that might be a sign that there's some unhealthy dynamics.
Yeah, how could you maybe ask your therapist if they're in community or consultation? Would you just ask them that directly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great and fair question that any healthy therapist would have no problem answering.
Yeah, that's true.
And especially if you have that language, since we're talking about it now, just to ask what kind of consultation groups or supervision do you receive. I think that's perfectly fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about some practical next steps. So one could be assessing the situation. So is your therapist having a bad day, or is this a pattern that you're seeing in them? Yeah, what could you look for in that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Everyone has bad days or off days. Your therapist is not going to be perfect. They might sometimes say something that doesn't quite hit right. But being able to discern, is this a pattern? A couple of things you can look for are some of what we've already talked about. So, are they consistently connecting to you? Are they able to understand and validate your feelings, join with you in what you're sharing? Are they following ethical boundaries?
Right.
And are they prioritizing your needs and your goals in therapy rather than their perception of your needs and goals?
I always tell my clients to give me 3 solid sessions, and I do the same for them. Let's try this 3 times. Because what if the first session, there's days where I can tell you that I am off, and I will say it to my clients, I am just off today.
Yeah.
Because we're humans.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for clients to know that as well, that therapists are humans. We're not going to get it right every time. The other thing is, can the therapist take accountability when they do say something that's off?
That's
so
huge.
Whenever you make a suggestion and the client says no, that's not it. Could the therapist be confident enough, secure enough to say, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry for the assumption that I just made. Or are they gonna, like we talked about before, are they going to be defensive about what they just suggested? So give them a fair shot. There's days. Therapists have their days too.
That's right. Yeah. It's like any other relationship. You have to build it.
3 sessions for sure. There's a concept of shopping for a therapist. What would that look like? Is it healthy to shop for a therapist?
I think it can be, for sure. Because not everyone will be the right fit. So I think there is a space for you to, maybe do some background research as you're looking for therapists. If you know there's a certain style you're looking for, maybe you don't know that at all and you just need to try. But making sure you're verifying their credentials. You might even be able to see if they're in supervision or consultation. Yeah. Some websites do advertise that. You could also have, trusted family or friends recommendations. That's a really great way to find people that you think might be a good fit. And it's also perfectly normal and okay to try a couple before you find one that works.
Yeah. A good therapist should be able to also tell you if they're not a good fit for you.
That's right. Yeah.
I always like to tell my clients that if I'm not a good fit for them, they can tell me and it won't hurt my feelings.
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, you can tell your therapist, I don't think we're connecting. Because your therapist is probably feeling that same vibe from you. I think it's perfectly fine to shop around a little bit, see a few therapists, find out which one is best for you.
Yeah.
But therapy is uncomfortable. And so I think it's hard to distinguish between, am I uncomfortable because I'm seeing a therapist?
Yes.
Or does this therapist make me feel uncomfortable? It's a lot to think about. Well, thanks so much for joining and talking about the red flags in Christian counseling. And hopefully this was beneficial to the listeners.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.